Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Can You Hear Me podcast. I'm Rob Johnson, president of Rob Johnson Communications.
And I'm Eileen Rochford, CEO of the marketing and strategy firm, the Harbinger Group. In today's workforce, organizations are made up of people from multiple generations, each bringing unique perspectives, communication styles, and expectations. While this diversity presents incredible opportunities for creativity, innovation, collaboration, it also creates the real challenges for leaders trying to connect and engage their teams effectively.
Yeah, think about communicating across all of those generations. Now, to really help us understand how we can effectively bridge these communication gaps, we're joined by expert Janine MacLachlan. She's the CEO of Janine MacLachlan LLC and a communication strategist and workshop designer on a mission to help leaders communicate for impact, including preparing for high stakes engagements on TV or at the podium and motivating teams to increase effectiveness. With years of hands-on experience working with iconic brands like Quaker, Sargento, and Procter & Gamble, Janine brings proven expertise in crafting impactful messages. She combines techniques from journalism, neuroscience, and design thinking to help leaders and organizations communicate with clarity and confidence, whether they're engaging boards, volunteer leaders, or diverse teams. Janine, how'd I do? Thanks for joining us.
Excellent, Rob. Thanks for inviting me. I hope I can live up to that.
You'll do just fine.
Right. We have every confidence. No doubt about it, Janine. So I'm thrilled to have you here because it has been quite a long time, but very early in my career, I had the pleasure of working with you. And since then, I've had the pleasure of observing all that you have been doing professionally. So is it okay if we start there? Maybe give our listeners a little bit of your origin story and then tell us what you're doing today.
Sure. Thanks, Eileen. Like many people, my origin story starts with childhood. I was the one in the backyard with the notebook writing stories. So in fact, my mother saved them, and probably somewhere in my mid-30s, a box came when I moved out years ago, and they were purging, and so I still have some of those stories somewhere in a box.
Oh, that's so
when
cute.
it is super fun. Some of them are in crayon, some of them had illustrations, which I did not pursue after this, but I did go to journalism school, and then most of my career has been spent in the agency business, where I worked with these large global brands, helping them communicate to their consumers. These were mostly products that you would buy in the grocery store, like Land O'Lakes butter, Sargento cheese, Quaker oatmeal, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of Procter & Gamble brands. And my dad worked most of his career with P&G. And so I have a soft spot for that company as well. As I moved along, one of the things that I did within the agency world was train a lot of spokespersons and executives to go on TV, to make an important speech. And I realized that communication skill that I could bring to these high-powered people was something that was my vein of gold. People say that you should focus on what you're good at, but other people either are not good at or believe they're not good at. And so what I have done in the last 5-6 years is work on my own with organizations, breaking things down so that anyone can do it. In fact, I worked on a program with Julia Child, the iconic cook and most famous. I know Eileen's jaw's dropping for people who are listening. Yes, I even went to her house in Cambridge and was able to work on the Baking with Julia series. And one of the things that people remember about her is her recipes are long, but she breaks it down step by step by step so that anyone can make it. And so a lot of people believe that effective communicators learn how to do it by magic, and they don't understand that there are things that you can do to break it down so that everyone can succeed. And so that's what I do today.
Yes. Yes. And tell us where you're sharing your magical insights these days.
My magical insights are based in Chicago's West Loop. So we have a lot of restaurants and exciting companies that are based here right across Carpenter Street is McDonald's World Headquarters, and John Deere is here. Google, I'm kind of in the hotbed. hotbed of things going on. I
Yeah.
apologize for my cat's background music.
Cats are always welcome.
Most
real,
people
on the show.
are listening to this, but I was watching your cat, put in a photobomb you right there. That was awesome. I wish it was on video.
Well, we kind of are if you're watching in the right
Yeah, we
place.
are. On YouTube.
Yeah. Okay. So you also have some articles that you get published on occasion. Where are those
Yes.
appearing?
I'm an editorial contributor to Forbes and Fast Company. On Forbes, my focus is leadership strategy. I am able to interview a lot of people about how they communicate. In fact, one of the people I interviewed was Janine MacLachlan, who was CEO and chair of IBM, and she repeated my talking points to me verbatim, unprompted. So I'll share that later on when we talk about the say it shorter concept and how to focus. For Fast Company, I help people present their ideas better. One of my articles that was incredibly popular was, go early. If you're a speaker, get to know the people that you're talking to. And, people thought it was genius. And really there are a lot of things that are just common sense that people don't think about until you remind them that it's a good idea.
Yes. And we're going to dive into a bunch of that today. But first, I believe I'm responsible for asking you the kickoff question. Do you think we're ready for that?
Here we go.
Okay, here we go. So, Janine, from your experience, what are some of the biggest communication challenges that arise where organizations have multiple generations working together?
And isn't that everyone now? You very rarely will find an organization that only has one or two generations. And one of the challenges is that people come with their own preconceived ideas about what the other generations are like. Boomers work too much and they don't care about, or they don't know about tech. They're clueless. The Xers are these cynical slackers. Millennials are all entitled. In fact, I've had people say, now I don't want to come across as an entitled millennial, so what should I do? And then says Gen Z, no attention span. They were born with phones in their hands and they can't focus. And those things are not necessarily true. I mean, there's an element of if we don't get to know each other, that's what we think. And so those challenges need to be addressed by curiosity and intention. And that's what I help people do. So when I talk about curiosity, one of the things that's very easy to implement is to have either a kickoff meeting for a project, or maybe it's you're heading up to the end of the year and you want to get people up and running, excited about what's going to be happening next year, or any time is a good time to say, how can we work well together? How do I like people to work with me? And I'll give you an example. One time I was part of a team, and a guy I worked with really regularly was in a different generation from me. And he says, I want all the details. I want you to tell me everything. And I said, this is why we get along, because I don't want to know any of those details. I am a big picture person. I'm going to do the strategy, and the details might make my eyes go crossed. And so we worked well together because we each liked what the other didn't. And so that can be people of the same generation or people of different generations. So the idea is to set those ideas aside and get to know the person. Eileen, you and I were talking about someone who works with you who is extremely proficient with very little experience. And that is not something that most leaders expect. They expect that a younger worker might need a ramping up period. And that's not always true. So we should check those things, put them to the side, and then talk about them when a strategy is needed to address those differences.
That's great advice. I was just at dinner the other night with our team, and I didn't realize that. I'll just explain what I didn't realize. So we have at the dinner, we had 2 Gen Z, 2 millennials, and an Xer. Actually, 2 Xers. So I was just asking a couple questions, like, "Oh, isn't it funny how my daughter has explicit? She's Gen Z. She's explicitly said that if I text her and use capitalization or punctuation, I'm being aggressive."
Yes. You're mad at her.
I'm mad at her. And she'll say
Yeah.
that, why are you so mad?
Right.
And things. And so I turned off the punctuation, the auto set on my phone so that I wouldn't do that. And I was just trying to, basically, meet her where she's at and acknowledge that I heard her. And if it's important to her, it's important to me. You know what I mean? And so I explained to these guys, I was like, gosh, I'm sorry. If at work, you have to kind of conform to this other level or way of communicating. Is it true? Does that, make you feel, you know, attacked, if you will?
Right.
And they laughed. They're like, no. They're like, that's silly.
Oh.
Which, not as in my daughter's silly at all. That's not what they
Right.
meant. They just meant, no. For whatever reason, they love emojis. They love punctuation. They love hard returns. They're like, that's just not me. Plenty of people who are my friends, but then they also said, when we're communicating with each other, another Gen Zer, that the barrage of texts, which are essentially single word communications, this like, back and forth, one word, back and forth, back and forth. They're like, look, and they showed us this whole string of texts with their friends. And I was like, God, I would literally put like daggers in my eyes if I had to like respond to that many texts. So it was just a fun like kind of for me, it was, this exploration of differences. And we went on to talk a lot about many other things, but having the conversation revealed so much for me, that I filed away, and then
For sure.
in kind of communicating with these folks as we move on throughout our professional lives together. It's all going to evolve, but at least right now I gained a much deeper understanding, appreciation just from having the chat. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Eileen, that reminds me of, I'm sorry, Rob, did I
No, go
interrupt you?
You're a little quiet on the mic there, Mr.
No,
Johnson.
keep going.
Eileen, that reminds me of a situation where I was brought in to work with some philanthropy professionals. And so they wanted to bring up the younger generation of fundraising professionals, who worked on corporate giving and things like that. And one of the exercises that we did was actual role playing in terms of conversations, because when people are used to texting so much and they're not used to, people are all working on Zoom, WebEx, conference calls. There are very few in-person meetings, and very often a philanthropy professional will have better success if they invite someone in and show them what it is that they're supporting. And people are not used to that, and it causes anxiety. And so they had a series of exercises where we looked at, here's what we can do to practice talking in real life, and we even talked about, okay, you have conversations with your grandparents, right? You talk to your parents, right? This is not so different because we're all people, and here's how you structure what you want to say, so you want to have a plan for that conversation.
Oh, that's great. Wow. I was just telling someone earlier today who's kind of, launching into the job search. And I just said, look, you need to go expose yourself to more people of different generations in person, whether it's at your library, whether it's at, your city council meetings, just find places where you can talk to people, because you're going to gain a lot of skills you don't have right now. And you really definitely, are going to need them. So that's an interesting thing too. Okay, Rob, please save us. We keep talking so much. It's time for you to come in.
I don't want to interrupt.
I don't want to interrupt. You never interrupt. Come on.
I'm actually glad we're talking about this, because as Eileen knows and our listeners know, I'm writing a book called Over Communicate that's going to be out in early 26. And chapter 12 is communicating across generations. We had a couple of younger people on the podcast, 4 to 6 months ago, talking about this very subject and how important it is and how they like to be communicated with. And I just think it's so important that everybody understands, because as you put it, there's not 1 or 2 generations working anywhere anymore. There's 3, maybe 4 working wherever it is that you work. And so it's really important to talk about these things. So I know that you are a proponent of the Say It Shorter strategy. Would you explain to our listeners more about what that is and how leaders can use this approach to improve communication effectiveness across these generations that we're talking about, Janine?
Of course. So the Say It Shorter concept came about from a Forbes article I did about simple strategies to get your ideas heard. it was picked up by the Forbes Women newsletter. And then one day I wake up and I had all these requests on LinkedIn saying, I read your article, my team needs a Say It Shorter workshop. Now, I did communication workshops that had a much more boring name. And then I realized, oh, the whole concept is around how to get more done by getting to the point. Because what happens with many knowledge professionals is they think, oh, if I can just include more information, then my project will be successful, my boss will approve my raise, everything is going to happen because I have included everything. And what happens is, for people who understand journalism, they used to teach a concept, maybe they still do, called the inverted pyramid, which is you put the most important information up at the front, at the top. And now it's on a website, no one wants to scroll down. So everything has to be above the fold. People don't want to scroll in an email. So what you need to do is get the most important part up first. And so that's the first concept of Say It Shorter, is start with your headline. A lot of knowledge professionals, particularly people in science, research, other professions like that, they want to give evidence, 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 and then the thesis sentence is at the end. And by then people are either, if it's in a meeting, they're looking at their phone. If they're in an email, they put it to the side for when they can come back later. And we know that later never comes because people just don't have that kind of time. And then and this is the Ginny Rometty of IBM part where she reinforced what I say, 3 key points. She says, I might talk for an hour. I'm not going to cover more than 3 points. And so if you try to give 10 points, 12 points, you're just going to lose people. And so you need to think about, what is your audience? Who's your audience? What do they need to know? So if you're communicating to your CEO, for example, that person is going to need a different level of detail than communicating to your immediate boss, who might need to know about the formulas that you used for all those calculations. Your CEO only needs to know what's going to happen if we do yes or no on this particular project, or give me an update about what's important, not all the details in the background. Now, you should do your homework and have all those details, but you don't want to push them all into your presentation or to your email or whatever message you're trying to send out.
And you said
I
it
love
shorter.
this.
I love it.
And she did.
Oh my gosh.
That's why you were expecting that there was going to be more.
Wow.
Yeah.
I can go on and on with all the examples, but the idea is, get to the point, people, but get to the point based on who is your audience, not what you want to bring to this today.
And that's really hard being a subject matter expert sometimes. And I talk to clients about it all the time. It's like you have this breadth and depth of knowledge and you want to share everything, but you can't. You got to prioritize your messages. You have to know your audience, the things you're talking about, Janine. And the quicker they understand that whatever meeting you go into, whatever interaction you go into that day, that's what you're there to do. You're not going to reinvent whatever genre it is that you're a part of. So
absolutely,
take those wins when you can get them.
It's like decluttering. You can keep anything, you can't keep everything. So if you want a good looking closet, get rid of the stuff that's not working this time.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that analogy.
Appreciate.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to remember that tomorrow when I'm editing this really long article. Thank you. So I just love this approach overall, Janine. But I'm wondering, I know you have some of these. Could you share some examples of, success stories-ish where organizations have successfully navigated multi-generational communications challenges, things that you have, knowledge of or experienced?
One of my favorite stories is I have worked for a number of years with a college. And mostly I work with what they call cabinet, which is the college president, vice presidents, deans, heads of IT, like the C-suite plus the deans of the different departments. And at one point, they decided that their administrative professionals should go through the same training that they go through. And one of the things that we talked about a lot with the admins, the staff execs, was understanding your role and not diminishing yourself. And we talked a lot about, not using diminishing language and understanding that they are the mouthpiece for their leader. And if they are supposed to get approval, they should not spend 2 weeks of email saying, oh, sorry to bother you. I know you're so busy, et cetera. So sometimes the cross generation also has to do with who has status and who reports to whom. And, there are a lot of administrative professionals who have a lot of experience, and yet they still behave in a more diminished way. So we talked a lot about language that these people could use to say, hey, I've reminded you 3 times. Should I schedule a meeting for you to approve this piece? That's a trick that I would use throughout my career, because people don't want to have a meeting to read and whatever piece needs to be approved. And so if they see a meeting coming up, they're going to get that back to you toot sweet. And so we talked a lot about that. And so what that said to me, and there were other levels that also went through this training and gave feedback about having a common vocabulary across all levels and all generations really helped them understand how to communicate more effectively. So I think that's a great story. They even talked about, and I said to my boss, how'd I do on, bird dogging you down to get to you to review that? And, and usually you're, it's past due for 2 weeks before you sign off on it. And so even that kind of reminder of, usually I let it slide, gives them the signal that, everyone needs to step up to their responsibility. And that's part of what effective communication can do.
Huh. Oh, that's so true. I love that.
So refreshing, isn't it? To hear
Mhm.
all the things that we espouse, and then here she is just rattling them all off, and just
Get right to it.
It's terrific. It really is.
Yep.
So as we look ahead a little bit, Janine, because we like to kind of discuss the issue and kind of dive in on it like we have been. But looking at how do organizations prepare their leaders and teams to communicate more effectively as the workforce demographics continue to evolve and the generations change in that workforce demographic?
One thing that I recommend to everyone is that they identify times in their calendar to address this, whether it's going to be once a quarter, we're going to spend an extra half hour during our team meeting to talk about how are we doing, how could we do better. That's one of the things that I do with coaching when I'm working with speakers is what did you do well? How could you be even better? And that's something that is palatable to people, because you don't want to have those debriefs about, this went well, but boy, you really messed up on that one, because people don't like to hear it. It's uncomfortable. People are perfectly willing to admit their mistakes, but you can say, what would we do different if we were doing it again? Another thing that I recommend is that teams have team agreements, which is we will check in on this either every day, once a week, depending on the timing that's needed with the project. We will devote time. I knew a leader who wanted to had a relatively small team, but had a one-on-one coffee chat with every one of her team members once a quarter. So that way they could just talk a little bit and she could get to know them. There is a book that I wrote about in Forbes where the author talked about when people it was about having fun at work. And it was about, first of all, when you get to know each other, you have more fun at work because you know each other better. But also when the going gets tough, it's easier to ask a favor because you have that relationship and you've invested in getting to know people. And so I know that seems to be a challenge in terms of intentionality when we are going so fast. And there are a lot of, I was working with a one-on-one client about communication, and she said, we work 12-hour days on an easy day. And so perhaps there are some boundary setting things or something that needs to happen, but they've all kind of accepted that this is their culture. And so what can you do within that culture to make it a little bit more palatable so that you can help each other understand how you work best in terms of when you're communicated with.
Are there other questions we should ask in those environments in addition to what could we do better?
The idea of what we can do better is always a good goal. Other questions might be, do we have the right systems in place? Are we running around like crazy because we don't have systems in terms of how we decide we're going to communicate. Are we giving feedback to people? I talk a lot about direct feedback and, kind of half-hearted feedback, which is, oh, there seems to be an error on, we'll talk about editing an article. There seems to be an error on page 2. I think it might be. It's like, no, there's a mistake on page 2. So I have clients who their documents have numbered lines, and on page 2, line 12, there's a mistake. And so that's something that people can react to. And hopefully you're not saying it with a growl in your voice that, this needs to be corrected. And the other thing in terms of ongoing communication is looking at ways to give feedback so that you don't end up 2 years down the road when suddenly someone's on a performance improvement plan because they didn't get the right kind of feedback over the course of the time working together. And so again, all that has to be very intentionally. You have to stay on top of it because it's uncomfortable to have some of these conversations. And so you need to create a culture where frank communication and respectful, productive communication is part of the way you do business.
Mm-hmm.
Spot on.
Yeah. I'm wondering, are there any considerations that we should be aware of or that you know of when it comes to, it's not stereotypes, but there are some ways of communicating with a few of the generations that are in the workforce right now, that you can really force people, particularly in Gen Z. We hear this, I hear this a lot even from my team members who are in Gen Z, that their first reaction is to just shut down if
Sure.
you go at this the wrong way. So
Absolutely.
what are some things to avoid in your professional opinion
Sure.
to not have that happen, I guess?
One of the things that I always recommend to senior level people is to ask for feedback because people aren't used to that. They're used to the boss giving feedback. They're not used to the boss saying, hey, how'd I do? And that needs to happen on a regular basis because if suddenly the boss says, oh, I want feedback, if you have trained them that you are not receptive to feedback, then they're not going to give you that feedback and that closing down will continue to happen. Usually it happens better one-on-one where you can have a one-on-one with someone and say, hey, I really like your thoughts on how I handled that meeting. Or, sometimes you can talk about low stakes. Like, could you watch this video? I want to do, and this is something that's across generations. I want to put a video on LinkedIn and I know you are on social media more than I am. Can you help me create this video? What should I say? How should I do it? So you kind of elicit their advice and that's going to be helpful where you're asking them for their expertise in addition to helping to coach and guide and ask them for their feedback on how you're doing.
Oh, that's great. That just sets up a whole other dynamic.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Thank you. Well, that was just a great closer. Thank you, Janine.
Perfect.
I just really appreciate you being on the show with us today. I know, Rob, you do too.
Oh, absolutely.
And thank you. We're just so happy that you were here. And I can't believe that I haven't asked you to be on the show before now, but I'm certain you'll be back again in the
I'm
future.
surprised
if
I
you'd like
haven't
to.
pitched myself. So both of us. Yeah. And Rob, congratulations on the book. That sounds amazing.
Thank you.
And I always talk about over communicating because people don't hear it the first time.
Yeah, for sure.
That well, and the way that I express it, and Eileen knows this, and she's actually featured in one of the chapters in the book,
Oh,
is
terrific.
if you're going to properly communicate with your teams to get everybody aligned on the same page, if you think you didn't communicate with them enough, you probably didn't. Ergo,
Right.
you need to over communicate. And I always tell people, I'm not talking about micromanaging. I'm not talking about sending people 75 emails. I'm talking about making sure that you have gone the extra mile to communicate clearly and succinctly. And that's really what it's about. So thank you for the kind words. I may need a blurb writer or a beta reader or something at some point.
Yes.
So I may
I'd
lean on
be
you.
delighted. And when you publish, we can do an article for Forbes or
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah,
I
terrific.
accept. I accept. No,
Yay.
it's going to be
Yeah.
out in early 26, probably February. I'm
Oh, which is
currently
practically
wrapping
tomorrow.
up. What's that?
Practically
Practically
tomorrow.
tomorrow.
Yeah,
Oh, jeez.
I know.
I know it's
It's what it
November,
feels like.
people.
I know. It's going to be
It's
right around the corner.
yeah. It's actually the holidays. I don't know if you guys know that because
Right now, it is the
this is our
holidays.
final
Yes.
episode of
Janine's
Can
been
You
in a
Hear Me for
coma.
2025.
Oh
It
my
is.
gosh.
I'm Rob Johnson. If you'd like to comment on the podcast or suggest a topic, please contact us at our Can You Hear Me podcast page on LinkedIn. Happy holidays to Janine and Eileen.
Thank you. And same to you, my co-host and my
Pleasure.
friend
Yes.
Janine.
Happy
Yes.
holidays.
Okay, everybody. I'm Eileen Rochford. If you liked what you heard on our show today, please consider giving Can You Hear Me a positive review wherever you get your podcasts, such as Apple or Spotify, because your great reviews help other listeners find our show. Thanks so much for listening today, and we really hope you learned something. I don't know how you couldn't have with Janine on. Thanks, everybody. Yes.